Hi, good morning all, and thank you very much to our panel for joining us. Let me just... Wow, what a presentation. Feeling quite emotional about after that, so I need to compose myself, but thank you very much for sharing what you did just then. A lot of learning for us all, and hopefully through this discussion we're going to share some insights and knowledge with you, the audience, and I'm going to start with a very light question, okay? Growth mindset. So many consider leading growth in a company isn't just a skill, but rather a mindset. How important is it for a leader to have a growth mindset, and how do you believe it leads to business growth? Something very light-hearted to get us started. And if I could, Susan, if I could come to you first.
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to have a growth mindset, but it's also important to define what growth looks like for you. So I think for some businesses it is about having multiple offices or having increasing your staff, increasing your turnover, but there are a lot of other things to it, as we've just heard, and that can be about developing your people, developing your relationships, taking on bigger and better clients. And I think all of those things are really, really important if you're going to be able to respond to the inevitable changes and the challenges that the business throws at you. So definitely, yeah, growth mindset's very, very important, but don't get hung up just on the headlines.
Okay. If I could, Khaled?
Yeah, sure. In my experience, growth mindset is a very interesting phrase, and I think if you decouple that into two separate aspects, the growth element being one and just the mindset element being one as well. If we cast our minds to kind of the animal kingdom and have a look at mindset there, for example, and look at who's the king of the jungle, let's say. When we look at that situation, is it the strongest animal? Who's the largest, strongest animal? The elephant, so perhaps not. Is it the fastest animal? The cheetah, perhaps not, or the leopard, perhaps not. It's the lion. And why is it the lion? Because of the mindset of the lion. When you've got that mentality and the mindset to achieve something, to persevere and get something done. And applying that more to the point on kind of business, having the mindset to achieve goals, to have targets, and that thing is one aspect of it. But the other aspect is the growth aspect, where, like it was touched on earlier, continuous improvement, small change, then 1% changes. If you keep implementing, then you have the growth, and you end up coming to a point where you expand outside, perhaps into a larger group, a larger organisation. It's continuous improvement that keeps driving that change, that innovation that we talk about a lot. And I think it's one of the most important things in a leadership position is to have that growth mindset, and not just a mindset of, I want to achieve a goal, because what next? You need continuous improvement, you need continuous growth. And I think if in a leadership position one doesn't necessarily have that growth mindset, you not only stunt your own personal development or development of your organisation, but also teams, individuals within your organisation. So I think it's probably the most important factor to have in a leadership position.
Thank you for that. Kai?
I like Khaled's answer. King of the jungle. Being a Leo, I'm not going to argue with that. That works for me. I think growth mindset, everyone should have a growth mindset. Okay. If you'd asked me that 10, 15 years ago, it would have gone above my head, what's growth mindset? But the idea of being open to new ideas, being humble to know when you're wrong and be prepared to learn, the idea of knowing that you won't always have the answer, whether you're a business leader or just an individual, I think it's crucial, because that's when you do grow. To Khaled's point about breaking it up, about growth and then mindset, I think then as a leader, a business leader in an organisation, it is crucial. If you are of effectively a closed mindset, you literally are stunting the growth of the business, whether you realise it or not, because everyone around you then will either replicate your behaviour or they will feed off it, and they will literally not come to you with new ideas. The organisation needs to be of a general growth mindset. You're never going to get everyone in the business to have that. It's just not, the probability is just not possible. But you need to have as many people with that mindset to be prepared to explore new ideas. We've just seen the case study that Arian took us through just then of how a company doing just tins now does so many other things. That's a growth mindset organisation. It's constantly evolving in what you do.
Just focusing on your story in terms of Planisware and the journey that that organisation has been on, and touching on the fact that, being open to new ideas, leading a business as you have, from sharing one desk to now being multinational, a global organisation, employing in people and contributing to their lives. How have you, as a leader, when you've at times when you felt I don't have the answer to this, what have you done? What could leaders in this room potentially benefit from?
One of the things that I do is I literally take my telescope out in the middle of nowhere, pitch black, and just stare at stars and take pictures of galaxies. Joking aside, time for yourself. So that's what I do. I take time out for myself, and I've had to learn to do that. So Naomi, who sat over there, one of my mentors, amazing Naomi. You have to give time to yourself. If you don't, you end up in a vicious cycle of thinking you have to have the answer, and thinking you do have the answer, and never ever thinking out about the team that you have around you. I've had to learn in the last 6 years of building Planisware UK to where it is that I have to trust my team. I have to let them make the decisions sometimes. I have to realise that I don't have all the answers. And when things get difficult, if you let them do that, you become a lot more dependent on them than dependent on you. And that's quite a bizarre mental state to be in, because you think you're supposed to be the one in charge. But actually, they have more of the answers than I do. So yeah, take time out for yourself and rely on your team. Get them to actually be more mobile and agile to make decisions for you.
And that comes back to the point everyone's saying, knowing the place, but also people and relationships within the organisation. Thank you very much. We'll have some questions, Q&A at the end of our questions to the panel here. But we've heard a lot about leadership. And Tom, forgive me for reading this, I want to get this right, but business leaders have had a lot to deal with over the past few years. If we'd gone to sleep in 2020 and we were waking up now, yes, the world is very different, and we're behaving and thinking about things in a way in much greater depth, more people-focused, well-being, mental health, and others. So, over the demonstrating resilience has been fundamental when it comes to resolving complex challenges and making decisions which often pivot a company's direction. How do you personally deal with these complicated issues? Khaled, if I could come to you.
I've got personal experience on this, to be fair. So very early on within the pandemic, I, not too long after, started my current role at WeDo Digital. 3 months or so in, I actually ended up getting COVID. It was quite bad, quite serious actually. I was hospitalised, put on a ventilator, and there were talks of putting me in a coma and things like that as well. So I feel very fortunate to even just be here today, to be honest with you guys. Off the back of that, sort of 3 months, that's 3 months into my current role. So very keen to impress in a new job. You kind of new to an organisation, still kind of learning the role itself, still learning the industry and the people. And I kind of almost had that as a major setback in my own personal circumstances in life. And what I found quite helpful was just really, instead of burying your head in the sand, having that transparent conversation internally with the co-founders of the company, with sort of leadership, as to what is the plan of action. So my personal experience of that is, don't bury your head in the sand, bring the pain forwards and kind of understand what is actually happening, and come up with a plan and align at that leadership senior level and come up with a plan and a strategy to how you can come out of any sort of adversity in life. And that kind of applies to even fairly small business challenges that you may, little humps in the road that you kind of go through. You can always apply that kind of element to it, with, I think the key there being internal alignment. What are you actually doing about it? What is the problem? What are proposed scenarios? What are proposed solutions? So essentially, don't bury your head in the sand.
Okay, thank you. Kai?
Summed it up really well, really. Sometimes businesses think that, that once you have a plan, that's it. I think, I don't want to quote Mike Tyson, but he's the one that said, you have a plan until someone knocks you out. So you never know what's coming around the corner. As a team, we're currently trying to have a business plan that is, the vision is 2026, but tactically we're planning 2023 to see what we need to do next year in light of what we're trying to do in 2026. But that's a plan. You have a plan, you try to execute it, and then things come left field. I mean, I don't need to go on about the pandemic, but when things happen, you have to rely on the team around you as much as possible and come up with a plan. But then again, it is just a plan. So you have to recognise that, going to the point about resilience, recognise that you have a plan, but it might not be executed as you see it, and be prepared to adapt, again, growth mindset. So all those things start to play very well in together, and understanding that the team is part of that, the entire team. They have to know where we headed, where you're taking us, and why, and how do we contribute to that. And if they align to that, there's a higher chance that they will help you get there.
Okay, thank you. I sense a theme running here. It's about our people. Any thoughts on building on what's been said?
Yeah, it's a very similar response from me actually. That the one thing that you can guarantee is that things will go wrong, and sometimes it will be that the world throws something at you that you weren't expecting, and sometimes it will be that you've made a mistake as well that you then have to wind back and undo, and that can be a real setback and a big sort of knock to your confidence as well. And I think the key lessons that I've learned from that are, number one is don't panic, and go out and take photos of the stars. Or I've got a fish tank that I stare deeply into.
Works.
And I find when I'm not thinking about the problem, that's when the solutions tend to come to me. So don't panic, don't rush to change things or to fix things. But also, that idea of transparency and your team and your people, that if the people around you understand what's going on and where you're at, and if you're honest about mistakes you've made or the position that you're in, then you will find that people pull together. And as a leader, it's not just you. It is about the team, the company that you've built, and pulling three things together, and I think that's really important.
Can I ask, as director of TBS Acoustics, how have you made that happen in with your people?
So it's been growth for us has been a very, very slow process, and it has been much more about getting a really good cohesive team together. So we'll be 10 years old in January, but we're only 5 people. But those 5 people are people who work really well together. We support each other. We've been through COVID together, personal disasters together, business disasters together, and I think it has been hopefully me modeling what I want to see in them, that sort of honesty and support and openness and willingness to change, not just sitting there at the top going, I'm the boss, I say so, we're going to do it this way. Being open to listening and changing things when they're not going well. I think that's what's pulled us together, and that now lets us go forward using that same mindset with a bit less effort.
That's really helpful, thank you. So this is the last question, you'll be pleased to know, but feel free to elaborate. Of course, there are many factors which are important when leading a business or a team. We've touched on some of those. What else do you feel is essential to successful leadership? You're leading, you're inspiring, you're listening, you're developing, planning, but having to change your plans. Can I come to you first?
If you give me time to think about it.
Okay, I'll carry on talking for a moment.
One of the things that I've learned a lot more in the last 6 years, and I reference the 6 years because it's the first time that I've kind of started something from scratch. Usually I'm either inherited a team or I've just been part of another team and then it's grown, is empathy. And it's not just a quality that a leader has to have. I think anyone in the business should have it around your colleagues, especially given what we've all just gone through in the last 2 or 3 years. Empathy is crucial. People's lives, you have no idea how complex they are. When they're walking through the door and they're supposed to be working for you and doing whatever you've asked them to do and you're paying them to do, often we disconnect the two and think that, right, well, whatever's going on in your life, that's that. But when you're at work, you do what we're expected to do. That's not going to happen. Okay, we're humans and everything is mashed into one. You have to have empathy to understand what's their context. Someone is sat in the corner and they're not saying very much, or when they come in and they've got this big smile on their face, you have no idea what's going on behind. And you have to remember to just tread carefully and ask questions where you can, and where you can, support them, because at the end of the day, I think to what Aaron said about making people better, that's what businesses are ultimately. Yes, we're making things, we're delivering services, but ultimately we're an engine to make people better. So if you ignore part of them, then you're not going to do that. So I would say empathy is one of the biggest factors as a leader that you have to try and use.
Susan?
I love that answer, and I feel like I'm going to sound really cold-hearted now. I think it's definitely about your people, but you can't lead unless you're also leading yourself. So you should always be open to learning, taking on new information, consider lots of different things, even if you consider them and then reject them. And Richard spoke earlier about the Help to Grow programme. That's been a really good example for me. I was on last January's cohort for that. And I'm still almost processing a lot of the things I learned there. But as a result of it, I am making little incremental changes, and those 1% changes, little things are happening throughout our business all the time, just as a result of the things I learned there. So yeah, just always be learning, always be developing. Never just assume that just because you're at the top, you know it all.
Thank you. Khaled?
I think between them both, they've answered and stolen a lot of my points there. I think there's a big empathy factor there. That's probably one of the most important factors. I think something else that's perhaps not been mentioned is it's not all about the tech. So we work in the tech space, we're very much involved in tech. It's not always about how smart you are, how much you know about things, more on kind of Susan's point there. It's all about how you can get the best out of people, how they can self-develop, how you can assist them self-developing. Of course, there are aspects of technical and non-technical criteria that you want to improve, or requirements you want to improve, etc. But it's mainly for me around understanding your team, helping to build your team, grow your team, and I see my role as being a key facilitator in that. It's not all about me, it's not all about what I know, what I don't know, it's about the team, the organisation as a whole. And it pretty much sort of echoes what Kai and Susan have covered there really, so I don't think there's anything else much to say on that point.
No, I think it's interesting, this kind of having empathy but open to learning and knowing more. So, your experience on the Helping to Grow programme, meeting other business leaders, and did that help you see things that you may have thought you knew, but all of a sudden thought, oh, okay, there's a different lens here, maybe I can take some of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very, very easy to get almost hyper-focused on your own business and your own sector and your own industry. And you look at your direct competitors and you may start to go, oh, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? But actually some of the best ideas come from talking to people who know nothing about your industry, nothing about your business, because they will have a very different perspective on things. And they might just drop something in there, just a little nugget of something that sparks the thought, which makes the next big change.
Hence, 6 to 9 months on, you're still thinking, okay,
I'm still thinking
that,
about it, yeah. I still go back and kind of work through little bits of the workbooks and things every so often, just to kind of keep it fresh and keep it going, yeah.
Excellent. Kai, I could see you nodding there. What were you thinking at that moment?
I was just agreeing, really. Not to re-explain it, but yeah, I was just agreeing wholeheartedly.
Because you're leading, you're busy people, so it's this taking time back. So before I summarise some of the things we're talking, I'd like to sort of open it up to the floor, if you don't mind. I can see your hand up straight away. There is a mic, so we can spend a few minutes with any questions. So please don't hesitate or be afraid to ask. I'm sure our panel will be gladly answering your questions.
Hi, I've spent 10 years going into organisations where it's gone horribly wrong, and it's gone horribly wrong for the people. So it's where there's been the big scandals, particularly in the NHS. And when we've looked at that, it's the key theme that comes up is the trust. The staff didn't trust the leadership to tell them what was wrong. The leadership didn't trust the staff to listen to them. So much so that we've had to develop tech as a company to allow people to share that message anonymously and we now translate that into the organisation's risk register. But that makes me sad that we need tech to do that. So what do you think as leaders, how we can build that trust other than tech?
The way that I do it is by being relentlessly honest. So I have autism and ADHD, and I also have days where I just can't get out of bed. And I'm just very honest with my team about those personal challenges. I'm honest with them about the things that are winding me up at work. I try to sort of lead by example. I trust them with information and with sharing and with making myself a bit vulnerable, and I think that encourages them to do the same in the opposite direction.
I'm just following on from that, sorry. It's also, I think, important to have a forum, to have that honest, safe space, whether that's a regular one-to-one, whether it's, scheduled meeting, even if it's a let's meet up in person and get a coffee or something, just to be more involved with people, because particularly with working from home now, as a lot of us are doing in the post-pandemic, there's not that physical appearance anymore where you're seeing people building rapport, relationships. It's all through a Zoom call or a Teams call. So I think having that forum is essential to being able to create that relationship.
Okay.
I was having a chat with Janice earlier on about how we're trying to understand the tech ecosystem in Northwest and what we need to do right back to school level. This kind of a question to me goes way back to that, even at that stage, because what are we teaching our students in school about things like that? What are we teaching when they're in university? Do we touch on things like that? Because, take Planisware for example, we have probably 60-70% technical resources, whether it's product development or project delivery. But yet, we then promote them into senior roles. And we say, here, go manage someone. And then we wonder why they struggle or why they're not sure what to do. That's a bad move, because that, if not fixed, then escalates. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And then you've got two people, or rather the person managing them and a group of people, who the synergy is just not working, and they either, and it's not through lack of trying, by the way. This is not because someone's gone out their way to be a bad employee in any shape or form. It's just because these are things that you need to be embedding very, very early on in the education system, about how do you interact with your colleagues, how do you interact with people you're managing, how do you interact with people who are managing you, etc. All those things, when you're doing an engineering degree, probably doesn't get covered, but it should, because ultimately those people will be in those roles. So I would say it needs to be something that's way, way back in the education system. And again, the collaboration is where we start to fix that.
Time for one more question.
Hi. It's loud, isn't it? I had a question for Kai, actually. I was just wondering, obviously you started your business from scratch just yourself, and I'm in that position where I'm just a solo business owner at the moment. And you mentioned how you got your first extra member of the team. I was wondering, in terms of that sort of decision, does it come from a place of realising there's more work that you can possibly handle yourself and needing that extra helping hand? Or is it a case of thinking, I need to get someone in as well that will help propel that growth in the business? And I suppose that's my thing, is how to build that team over time, and just to get it beyond just me.
It was necessity more than anything. So Sam, she joined, and it was always on the cards, because so Planisware has head offices in Paris, and we came up with a plan before I joined about what we would do if we were to set up in the UK. And any French people in the audience? Sam will attest to this. The French culture of working, interacting. I have a French-ish background, so I understand it a little bit. It's very kind of collaborative and very, I don't want to say blasé, but it's less formal. So it's quite conversational. They'll have a chat. They'll have a 2-hour meeting, discuss a whole bunch of stuff, and then go and have a coffee, and then make the decisions over coffee. Very sort of more like that, and the idea of having someone in marketing was discussed, and I was like, I need to hire someone in marketing, because I don't do marketing and we're not known in the UK. And then it dawned on me that they weren't going to tell me to do it or not to do it. They would say, "Yeah, it's a good idea, yeah." And then it was up to me to do it. So the point where I realised that I need someone to just execute that, it was a case of, yeah, I just need to get someone on board to do it. So sometimes there's a need. When you get to a point where it's more about capacity, then people always tell you, think about your cost. Don't add to your cost unless you really, really need to. And keep it as late as possible. That's the other thing the French are very good at. Very frugal. They won't spend unless they absolutely have to. So I think that's a very good mindset, but it depends on the business context as well.
Anyone else like to add to that question?
I agree with everything you said there. I think the on the flip side of that, if you were to approach it separately, some people, if you have investment early on, have the plan, start small, scale up, and be, the only thing I'd perhaps add to that is be self-aware of the business, to be, don't respond to things, preempt them happening, and plan for it to happen. So that's not necessarily spend the money, and for example, you may need to recruit someone further down the line. Be aware of what that role looks like when you are in a position to recruit, you can pull the trigger and you can actually just go ahead and do it seamlessly, as opposed to then thinking, okay, what does this role look like? What do I do now? And having that delay buffer in it. So always have a plan. Again, it won't always go to plan. It will deviate slightly, but have contingencies is what I would suggest.
This is definitely one of the areas where I got it wrong when I was starting out. I didn't really know what I wanted the business to be. I knew I didn't want it to be an enormous multidisciplinary. I knew I wanted it to be a group of people where I knew everybody and could work personally with them. But also, when you're a new business, you've not got any money, so it's a bit cost taking someone on. So what I would just say is think very, very carefully about what you need, and what's going to, it's a horrible phrase, but what's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck, what's going to have the most impact on what you do. So it might be somebody to tell you the technical work, or it might be marketing, or it might be an office manager. Really, really think it through. Think, what do I want to get out of this? Don't just rush into it because you think you should.
Okay. Our panel members will be around after this session, so many of you, there were a lot of hands who wanted to ask questions, so I'm sure they'll be happy to, the nodding, yes, to answer your questions. Apologies we couldn't get around to all of you, but just to summarise, I mean, we've talked about growth, resilience. We've talked about the key factors as leaders you need to think about when developing, thinking of your people. And what we have heard is, in terms of that growth mindset, people are key. It's about relationships. It's making sure that we're thinking about the people, as Aaron said, the people we work for, as opposed to who work for us. And so being open to new ideas and listening outside of our bubble, if I can call it that, to get that greater insight. And as a leader, it's essentially taking time for yourself, making sure you do take that step back to look at the world in a slightly broader way. We talked about, in terms of resilience, confronting some of those difficult moments head on, and thinking about, yes, plan, but don't bury your head in the sand. And once again, people came through this. But as leaders, and one of the clear messages that came in order to get those 1% changes was very much about empathy. And it's a skill that many of us will have to develop, included, myself included, but it's kind of empathy and being open to learning, and that can come from multiple sources. So the importance of having a different lens looking at any particular business channel. I'd like to thank you very much for sharing your insight, your knowledge. There are lots of people who want to ask you questions, so I hope you've made some time for that. But I'd like to thank you all very much, and thank you to the panel. Big round of applause for you.